so that he would have some peace and quiet. And everybody told him he should have a second copy of the book, but he didn't. And the complete book burned up in the fire. And there my grandfather and my father during the First World War. My grandfather was a medical officer out at Fort Lewis, and my father had just graduated from St. John's Military Academy and had gotten his commission. And here is Aunt Mary Lou soon after she got to New York. It's a sketch done by someone for New York Times. And it says something about the fact that she is doing a program called Continental Varieties on Sundays. There she is. That's a real cheesecake picture. In the Sunday supplement of the New York Times. But she did make it big on Broadway. There's my Aunt Catherine. She was married when the family was in Vienna. She met a doctor from Texarkana, Arkansas. And they were married in a lavish wedding in the Sacra Hotel in Vienna. And there are my grandparents and their children on my grandparents' 25th wedding anniversary. Way down at the table with the headband is Mary Lou, and then my father, grandmother, grandfather, Mina, and Catherine. And here are several generations, my grandmother standing, her daughter Catherine seated, and her mother, Wilhelmina Foss, and her first baby. I think that was at 601 North Grafton. And here's Mary Lou, my glamorous singing auntie at the height of her career. And my father, just before he died. My father died of a massive coronary when he was only 55. And he had a wonderful big medical practice, which a lot of old patients from my grandfather's. And it was a terrible loss to all of us. He was a wonderful family man. We all loved him very much. That's my mother from some Seattle paper. It says Norway's fairest. Her parents came to Canada. Her father was a civil and chemical engineer, and he came over to design bridges up in British Columbia. They came down to Seattle to see some close friends from Norway, never intending to stay, and they loved Seattle and stayed. And so eventually, my mother met my father. And there she is skiing up in Mount Rainier in 1924. And there she is playing the part of a Norwegian bride in a Norwegian festival. This is actually before she was married. And there is my grandmother playing the role of her mother-in-law in the ceremony. Rather prophetic. And this is one of the many probably parties. I think this was just before my Aunt Mina, who's there in the center in the white dress, with her arms around the two little girls who are my cousins, just before she went off to New York. And there are a lot of old family, old Tacoma people in that picture, many of whom I can't remember. Mr. and Mrs. Oxome, and the third from the left is my mother. And my father's picking over somebody's head in the background. And this is another party that my grandmother gave, my father in the top hat, and mother with the off-the-shoulder taffeta dress. And next to her is Al Hooker, who some of you might know, a wonderful old Tacoma person. And on the other side of my father is Emily Walker, who was Emily Nettleton. And this is a wonderful picture of my grandfather, probably, which was taken just a year or two before he died in 1937. And that's that. Thank you. Doesn't it? It does sound defiant. It's an old club that was formed in 1892. It was the first licensed club in Tacoma at that time. And the ladies in it promoted the arts, and they gave long dissertations, long papers on education and on social problems and on the arts. And in those days, the papers were, they were 40 pages long, all in beautiful handwriting.
Is it still in existence?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Oh, really?
My grandmother was a member, and my mother and I am a member. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Where at Lakeview was the home?
It would be hard to describe, but I'll try to, because when my grandmother purchased the property, or my grandmother and grandfather, it was about 100 acres of prairie. There was nothing there, except on one corner, the Mueller-Harkins Airport, and that is where the tip of Clover Park, the Clover Park School, yeah, and across from the cemetery there. And Mueller-Harkins Airport took up a whole corner, and it was just a small private airport for people who were learning to fly. And way back, when there were just paper-thin planes. And anyway, grandmother bought this huge, wonderful piece of property. The first thing that happened after quite a few years living there, and after her home burning down and her building another one, was that World War II came along. And immediately, the Navy, for some reason, way out there, took Mueller-Harkins Airport over, and there was train tracks going through that property, and they used it as a supply depot. And they just came to my grandmother and said that they were taking a whole bunch of her property and using it, and they never gave it back. And there were, it was interesting, there were soldiers and sailors out there digging foxholes on the property, and they paraded up and down in their uniforms with guns, and it was quite a change from all this beautiful wide open prairie. Then the second thing that happened was that Bridgeport Way cut right through the middle of her property, and the Visitation Villa, the Catholic school, was on one side. The property touched Visitation, and so of course there was nothing to do but sell the other half of it, and immediately all sorts of little World War II houses, cracker box houses, were built there. And my grandmother, who never, ever gave up, there was this magnificent oak tree on her property. And it was right where Bridgeport Way was going to go through. It was a tree that was like one of these tables. People came from all over to see this beautiful prairie oak. And grandmother decided that she was going to save that tree. And she went to court, and she got a lot of people in Lakewood to go to court with her, and they did. They saved it. They had to change Bridgeport Way. And they put a stone wall up to protect the roots of the tree. And then 2 or 3 years after she died and her house was sold, they cut down the tree, of course. But anyway, it was a huge piece of property, and there was nothing in 1937 when Lakewood Center was built. Those were the first buildings that were anywhere around there. I could ride my horse all day long, and Cy, you remember that, because Cy was a tremendous rider, and you never saw another house, or you didn't have to cross roads.
And you could see the mountain right clear.
The mountain was beautiful. From grandmother's window, you could, nothing in the way. It was beautiful. You rode in the springtime through these fields of blue canvas. It was just sensational. And as I say, nobody had to worry about children on horses crossing roads. Yeah, lots of violets, yeah. It was really beautiful. Those gorgeous oak trees. Yeah. There's still a lot of them.
I can still hear those frogs.
Oh, yes. Now, grandmother's property had a slough. She called it a slough on one side of it, which is still there, a part of it.
And the meadowlarks.
And the meadowlarks are there, and the frogs you can still hear. And Kmart, the Kmart is directly on the place that grandmother's house was on.
Lake ceiling.
So it just changed so amazing. If any of you are interested, there's some pictures over here, and feel free to look. And if there are any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Well, thank you so much for asking me this evening.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed being here very, very much.
I have one more question.
Wonder if she's here.
Still trying to figure out when she
Is
was.
Patricia Woodward? Woodruff. Patricia Woodruff?
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah.
You were wondering when
Now, there's that Folk Museum at Big Bend, and then Big Bend, right. Oh, that's just wonderful. And then there's one up near Lillehammer, out in the Lillehammer Valley, too. It's beautiful. But it's just, that folk. Now, did you go to Edward Big's house in Chase? Wasn't that one?
And the little cottage down at the water.
It's here. Use the microphone.
I was there. I remember that air student. But it was something.
The next program,
At least 5 minutes at a time.
Go ahead. My great-grandchildren, it's over 250.
It's fascinating. What kind of wood is it made out of? Were you ready to read this?
well, I'm not much at talking anymore, so you'll just have to put up with this. Woodruff. Is there someone here named Woodruff? No? All right. Janice Elliott brought a guest. She should be introduced and made welcome.
Marge Larson.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
This is
I
Marge
enjoyed
Larson,
it.
and she lived here in 1929, 28,
Oh, before then, yeah.
27.
I didn't live here, I visited here often. I remember the airport, looking as
Yeah.
you described it. Very interesting.
Well, it's very nice.
Also, ask if Patricia Woodruff is here.
I did several times.
I know, with the last name.
Yeah. Patricia Woodruff, not here.
Okay. She said she wanted to be in the members.
Is there any other business?
Rhoda wants that paperback though.
Rhoda wants paperback.
Give it to Elizabeth. I want to take it. She's talking to
Paper broke.
All right.
When is the next meeting, Si?
What?
When is the next meeting?
The next meeting. It is the third Tuesday in April.
Oh,
Hmm?
I think it's just 17.
Well, you should know. You're the program.
Davidson, that Davidson.
There's any more business? Well, we'll call it quits.
Si, you can tell them who the next speaker is.
You just did.
Oh, did I? Couldn't hear it. Sorry. Okay.
Never did name her.
she died.
Davidson family.
Any more? All right. Thank you.